Hey, what's up guys, it's Shamrocked here, and this is going to be a pretty big and long video. I'm going to separate it out, so if there are certain sections like just, sort of how to play or, maybe the rotation or whatever, feel free to just like check out the bookmark and go to whatever section you want to look at. But this is kind of just going to be like a comprehensive overview of how to play Farseer. Farseer received quite a significant buff with the new Coalescing Water talent that we got with the 11.0.5 patch. It actually just got a nice little DPS buff as well, and it is feeling extremely nice to play in keys right now. Not only is it very powerful, I would say pretty much just as powerful as Totemic at this point. Give or take a few dungeons where I think like maybe Totemic exceeds or excels over Farseer, but also, there's also like vice versa. There's also a lot of dungeons where Farseer is better, at least in my opinion, but they're very equal. I think you can push the highest of keys with both of these hero trees. So if you're interested in checking out Farseer, this will be a great starting point. And like I said, if you don't want to sit through this whole entire thing, you can, easily just check out the bookmark that, for the spot you're most interested in. If you have any questions, you can hit me up in the comments or on the Discord. But basically, I'm going to sort this video out in a couple of different ways. I'm just going to quickly go over the basically the difference between Farseer and Totemic and why you might want to pick one over the other, and what buffs happen to Farseer that make it so much more in line with Totemic now. After that, I'm just going to go through the actual talents. So I'll go through the hero tree as well as the talents on the restoration side that actually interact with the hero tree. And then finally, after that, I will sort of just go through, how you would play, and I'll just maybe throw up a few different boss fights or a few different trash areas as an example for how you can get through some hard stuff. So yeah, with that being said, let's get started. Oh, and also, sorry, just to mention, like I've already made a ton of these videos, man. Like since beta, I've been playing and making content for you guys. A lot of it was actually correct, so it's kind of funny because looking back to beta, I was very naive in how to play a lot of this stuff. I mean, I got Totemic down very fast and very easily, and that's just because it's a very obvious playstyle for sure. Not to say it isn't hard at the higher levels. It still is, hard to push that high content even with Totemic. But the rotation and the way it plays is very straightforward. It feels very natural. At the time of beta, Farseer felt a little bit clunky. It was still really fun to play and still very effective and had its strengths and weaknesses. But with the Coalescing Water talent and also just like the way that I've learned how to play it, and really the playstyle that I've learned how to lean into, it just the way I play it now is a lot different than what I would have played during the beta. And yeah, so just for reference, I've been timing and pushing 15s with no issues with this build at all. Like I definitely can, I feel like I can heal most of them 16, probably a few 17s as well. In terms of like meeting a heal check, I'm not saying I have a group that can actually go ahead and time those keys, but in terms of like being able to put out the throughput needed to time those keys, absolutely this build has you covered, and it's, in my opinion, a lot of fun. Like I don't know, there's something about it, especially if you're someone who likes chain heal, you're gonna love this build, and if you're someone who just likes sort of like nice feedback loops, you're really gonna love this build as well. That being said, if you're someone who hates chain heal, then it's unfortunate for you to play this season because both Totemic and Farseer lean very heavily into that ability. But all right, anyways, with that out of the way, let's get started. So Totemic versus Farseer. The weaknesses and strengths that I outlined in my first Totemic versus Farseer video months ago is still pretty much the same. So Totemic is really good at short bursts of intense healing, and it can do it very often. Like it basically runs on like a 20 to 25 second timer of where you can start your surging totem, and then you can activate your Earth Surge window any point throughout that, and basically just get like a buttload of healing in a really short time. So for dungeons like City of Threads, like the last boss, the third boss, the second boss, and on the first boss, honestly, all of those have really significant damage patterns where like to Totemic, where there's just like a lot of damage incoming very quickly and in short spurts. So the best example I have is the City of Threads last boss. So that boss is the a splice ability runs on a pretty much a 20-second timer. So you have 20 seconds of intense damage, about 3 to 4 seconds of nothing, and then another 20 seconds of intense damage, and then you get like a nice 30-second break while he does the tank buster. So Totemic is really nice because, like I said, you're on that sort of like 20-second timer with your surging totem. So you basically have an answer for everything. And because we have talents now that decrease the cooldowns, or sorry, decrease the time of our cooldowns. For instance, Healing Tide Totem is now on a 2-minute timer if you take current control. Ascendance is on a 2-minute timer if you take first Ascendant. Just that gives us a lot more tools to just handle all of those short bursts of damage. So with Totemic, you basically have cooldowns up whenever you need them. You have really nice short windows of burst that happen very frequently, and that is basically the healing style of the season really lends itself to the Totemic playstyle. However, Totemic has a pretty big downside, and that is the mana usage. And even with the Coalescing Water talent, it helps a little bit because it decreases the mana cost of Chain Heal, but it's not like it's not going to make you go from like, if you're someone who's going all the time out of mana, this talent isn't really going to save you. It's just maybe going to buy you a little bit of time. So yeah, that's the big downside for Totemic, but otherwise you have pretty much everything else covered. Like you have the healing, you have the utility, the bigger totems is nice. The downpour, the freedom to use downpour within that 12-second window and increase the group's health by another 10% is really nice. It's just it's a really great play style. Blizzard did a great job with it. That being said, as I mentioned earlier, it's pretty straightforward. So like once you get the hang of it, you got it, and then there's not really any like variation. At least I found like you're pressing the same like 4 or 5 buttons in a row every single damage event, and plus or minus whatever cooldown you're using. So unfortunately, in my opinion, as much as I loved it when I first started playing this expansion, it started to get a little bit dull, which is why I started leaning more towards Farseer. That being said, there's no reason to not use Totemic for a dungeon like City of Threads or Grimmit's Hole, where those damage patterns like lean so heavily into the Totemic playstyle. And so, yeah, I continue to use Totemic where I feel like it's stronger, and I continue to enjoy it. But I'm happy that I'm able to branch off into Farseer for a lot of the keys, so that Totemic doesn't become like completely stale. Because, like I said, a lot of the times it's like the same 4 or 5 buttons that you're just pressing in a row to get your rotation out. Okay, compared to Farseer. So Farseer, the strengths used to be that it was really insane spot healing. Like the single target healing was just massive, and it still is. And basically all the time, like you always have good single target healing. There's not like any windows you have to play around. You basically have one ancestor up, 100% uptime if you're running the Unleash Life talent, which I'll go over in a bit. But anyways, insane single target healing, and then your AoE healing, your short bursts of AoE healing, comparable to Totemic, were you only had like a 10-second window when you activated your second ancestor, which once again I'll go through when we go over the talents, but that window was every 30 seconds, right? So every 30 seconds you're really strong AoE healing for about 10 seconds, assuming you line up your cooldowns and set yourself up, and then you're kind of dead for the next 20 seconds until you get that second ancestor again, just for the big AoE healing. Whereas, like I said, compared to Totemic is on that 20-second timer, and then you can activate your Surging and Earth Surge windows at any point throughout that 20 seconds. So there's a lot more freedom to deal with the burst damage that comes in. Thankfully, though, for Farseer, because once you're fully tiered out, if you have your full tier bonus, you start having lots of gear. You can do this playstyle that I've sort of gravitated towards, and I don't know if anyone else is like running this in the high key level, but I promise you it's so effective and it's so much fun. But you basically base your entire playstyle around Flow of the Tides and just being able to get like 1,000 Riptides out like every 10 seconds, which is really nice. Okay, so with that playstyle, now you don't really have to rely on your 2 ancestor window alone for burst healing. You can still burst heal even without 2 ancestors. You're totally fine with 1. And with the Coalescing Water talent, you basically cycle between AoE healing via Chain Heal and then pumping out a massive Riptide on a target. And if you have an ancestor or 2, it's just like it's a huge single target heal. It's instant. It's basically free for mana. So Farseer is now bringing all of the healing that Totemic did. For the most part, like I said, Totemic is still probably a little bit stronger in terms of like consistent, constant burst healing, but Farseer can do it without running out of like any mana at all. Like I can do twice the amount of healing in Totemic, and that I would in Totemic over a window, and be at like 50 or 60% mana, whereas with Totemic I'd be like pretty much noon. So that's what I'm really enjoying about playing Farseer. With the additional mana, it's cool. You can basically do whatever you want. Like you don't have to worry about running out. Like you can cast Healing Surge as much as you want. You can cast Chain Heal as much as you want. You can do whatever you want with Farseer. You can cast however you want, whatever you want, whenever you want, and you don't have to worry about mana, which is really nice. And now, like I said, the HPS is really in league with Totemic, so it all really works out. So Totemic versus Farseer, which one should you play? In my opinion, you should play both. You should learn how to play Totemic and you should learn how to play Farseer. If you've already been playing the game, you're probably already good with Totemic because that's what most Shamans are playing. So if you know you're new to Farseer or you're trying to get better at Farseer, this video should help you out. And then, yeah, like I said, which one should you play? You should play both. What I mean by that is once you learn how to play both, you might like sort of kind of like I did, you will intuitively understand which hero tree is better for which dungeon or like which group composition or, you know, whatever. So if you want to be the strongest you can absolutely be, I would suggest learning how to play both. Okay, so with that sort of introduction and, you know, an overview of the hero trees out of the way and where they're strong and where they're weak, let's look at the Farseer, like specifically the Farseer build that I've been running with and what talents, you know, I pick. So let's look at the hero tree first. First you have Call of the Ancestors. So this is going to make it so Undulation or Unleash Life is going to call an ancestor to your side. And then an ancestor is basically just an augment to your abilities. So if you have been following my channel and you watched my initial Farseer guide, I made a grave mistake in sort of assuming that you would play around your ancestors. But what I've come to learn is that that's not the reality. Your ancestors really play around you, right? So you're not fighting for those 2 ancestor, 1 ancestor windows. You basically just have 1 ancestor up all the time, and then you activate a second one, you know, whenever you want a little boost to your healing. But it's not something you necessarily need to play around, and you're not weak without, you know, 1 ancestor or 2 ancestors. It is a noticeable difference when you have none up, but thankfully with the Unleash Life playstyle, you will always have 1 up, so you don't have to worry about that. So yeah, anyways, the ancestors, think of it this way, the ancestors are going to play around you, you're not playing around them. They're just going to augment everything that you do. Okay, next we have Latent Wisdom. This is going to make your ancestor spells 20% more powerful. This is actually on a choice node with another one that makes it so your ancestors have a 20% chance to call another one when they expire. So general rule for Mythic Plus and maybe Raid, but not so much Raid, more so Mythic Plus. You don't want to do the gambling talents. You don't want to have to rely on something happening, right? So in this case, always take Latent Wisdom. Having more powerful spells that you can rely on is better than trying to high roll, because if you low roll, you know, it's not like a raid where you have 4 other healers to help keep your group alive. In Mythic Plus, it's just you, it's you alone. So if you are relying on a gambling talent and you lose and your group dies, you know, it just feels bad. So it's better to plan your playstyle and your cooldowns and your healing style around having something you can rely on all the time. Okay, next we have Heed My Call. So this is ancestors last an additional 4 seconds versus routine communication, which makes it so Riptide has a 15% chance to call an additional ancestor to your side. So just like the other talent, I'm going to say exactly the same thing. Pick the one where your ancestor lasts longer because you can count on it. It's all the time. You don't have to worry about high rolling or low rolling. Additionally, what makes Heed My Call super strong is that it guarantees you have 100% uptime on at least 1 ancestor. Okay, so Unleash Life without Heed My Call summons an ancestor for 12 seconds and is on a 15-second cooldown. However, with Heed My Call, your Unleash Life ancestor is going to last for 16 seconds while Unleash Life is still on a 15-second cooldown. So as long as you cast Unleash Life on cooldown, you're always going to have an ancestor up, which is a lot of fun. So just to stop there, because I know some of you are like, well, you know, shit, I don't want to play Unleash Life because I've never played that in Mythic Plus before. You know, if you've played through Dragonflight or anything before that, Unleash Life is not really a Mythic Plus talent. It's always been Undulation, especially with the Undulation P-Wave tech that Rachel / SpectraShock came up with last season. That was widely popular and it made the class really, really strong. So to switch over to Unleash Life, I get the hesitation, but trust me, once you get used to using this ability, not only is it a lot of fun because you're summoning an ancestor with it and you just know that it's going to pump, but also it does contribute to, you know, making these nice big heals in Mythic Plus content, which we'll get to when I sort of get to the gameplay part. But anyways, yeah, so Heed My Call, take that one. Elemental Reverb is going to give you an extra Riptide. When combined with Echo of the Elements, you're going to get 3 charges of Riptide, which you may think is too much, and you're probably not going to be casting Riptide on cooldown at all times. But trust me, with the Flow of the Tides playstyle, you are going to want both of these, and you're going to want your 3 charges. Trust me, it's going to be amazing. You're going to be able to just send 3 Riptides, send your Chain Heals, send your Riptides, send your Chain Heals. It's just, like I said, a really nice feedback loop. Next, we have Offering from the Beyond. When an ancestor is called, they reduce the cooldown of Riptide by 2 seconds. Just like what I was saying, more Riptides is better, so that's a great talent. Primordial Capacity will increase your maximum mana by 5%, and more importantly, especially when combined with this season's tier bonus, Tidal Waves can now stock up to 4 times. So, you know, if you're doing 1 Riptide, 2 Riptide, you have 4 stacks of Tidal Waves, rather than if you were playing Totemic, you would only have 2 at that point, and it's very easy to run through those when you only have 2. Trust me, when you get used to having 4 stacks of Tidal Waves, you're never going to want to go back. It feels very, very nice. Next, we have Spirit Walker's Momentum. This is just like a Spirit Walker's Grace augment that makes it last longer when you get casts off during that window. Next, we have Natural Harmony versus Earthen Communion. Natural Harmony reduces the cooldown of Nature's Guardian by 15 seconds and causes it to heal an additional 10% of your maximum health. Nature's Guardian is over here on the class tree. It's basically like your fake cheat death, right? So it's, you know, if you actually, unlike other classes that have a real cheat death where like it basically, if they die, it like procs a heal on them and then, you know, it goes on cooldown for, you know, 3 to 5 minutes. Nature's Guardian is great because the cooldown is only 30 seconds, and although it won't save you from sure death, you notice when this is happening. Like when your health is brought below 30% by a boss ability, by a trash ability, by whatever, this basically shoots you up and gives you another chance to heal yourself. It's also great when 2 people are taking damage. So for instance, in Dawnbreaker, the guy before the last boss basically will target 2 people and do an insane amount of damage on them. You know, you can, if you know you have Nature's Guardian off cooldown, you basically you can ignore yourself and focus on the other person because you know this is going to give you a nice giant heal. So, and it also reduces the cooldown by 15 seconds. So this can happen. Oh, sorry. My mistake. The natural cooldown is 45 seconds. This 30 seconds is with this talent. But 30 seconds is pretty incredible to have like a mini cheat death up that much. And then it also heals for an additional 10%. Earthen Communion, on the other hand, is just something that gives you more Earth Shield charges and heals for 20%, 25% more. I would say this is like not even close in comparison, and some other people might disagree with me, but I mean, you're not relying on Earth Shield to heal you that much. It doesn't heal the tank for 25% more. I think that might be a little bit more significant. But and then having extra 3 charges for me personally doesn't matter because I refresh Earth Shield whenever I have downtime anyways, so you know, it's no big deal. Next, we have Maelstrom Supremacy. This increases the healing done by all of your basic heals by 8%. Pretty incredible for the Farseer playstyle. And next, we have Final Calling. This is going to summon a little shield every time an ancestor goes away. This is nothing too significant. It's usually like 2 to 3% of your healing throughout a key, which is like nothing to ignore. It's nice to have, but it's not like you're gonna like base a playstyle around this. It's basically just like bonus DR for you in the group. And then finally, we have Ancestral Swiftness, which is basically, aside from Flow of the Tides, this is what the entire playstyle is built around. So Ancestral Swiftness replaces Nature's Swiftness. It goes from a minute cooldown to a 30-second cooldown, and it also increases the damage or healing of whatever spell you use it on by 10%. It also, most importantly, will summon an ancestor for 10 seconds. If you're not using Heed My Call, it's only 6 seconds, which is not that long. So that's another reason why Heed My Call is so amazing, is because it gives you a 10-second window of 2 ancestors, which is very powerful. Like I said, you're not basing your playstyle around 2 ancestors. You can heal totally fine without it, but it's just such a nice bonus, and it makes healing those big burst windows, especially with the Coalescing Water talent, just so good. Like I said, the ability to summon 2 ancestors for 10 seconds, plus Coalescing Water, and plus being able to just use Flow of the Tides to your heart's content because you have so many Riptides out, is what makes the Spec competitive in Mythic Plus with the Totemic playstyle. All right, and with the hero tree out of the way, let's look at the Restoration talents and how they sort of interact with the hero tree. All right, so first we have, and sorry, I'm not going to go through all of these talents one by one. I'm just going to sort of like pick out the ones that I think are worth talking about. So first I'm going to start at Healing Rain. Healing Rain does not a lot of healing anymore, unfortunately. It's kind of long to cast as well. It's like a 2-second cast. And if you're coming from playing Totemic, you might like just automatically roll your eyes and sigh at having to use Healing Rain because you're just used to it being that instant cast and you're used to being able to move it around and all that stuff. So I'm here to bring you some good news. Healing Rain is not that important as Farseer. The only reason I would cast Healing Rain is for acid rain damage, which I'll talk about in 2 seconds, and just to get Deluge on the entire group. So if you're not running Flow of the Tides, which is fine, you don't have to. Like I said, my whole playstyle is around that, but I'm sure you could make it work with Ancestral Reach as well. Maybe. I don't know. I'd have to test it, or maybe you can test it and let me know. But anyways, Deluge increases your healing on anybody affected by Healing Rain or Riptide by 15%. Because you're eating most of your Riptides with Flow of the Tides, you can't count on Riptide being what activates Deluge on your group. So before any big damage event happens, you should cast Healing Rain on the group just so you get that Deluge buff while the actual damage window is happening. But other than that, you don't have to worry about Healing Rain. Like you can basically you could fly through an entire dungeon and not cast Healing Rain, except for like a few boss mechanics if you wanted to, where you want the Deluge talent. So once again, don't get caught up in having to hard cast Healing Rain as the thing that makes you not want to try Farseer, because it's really not that important. And now to quickly talk about Acid Rain. So Acid Rain is something that you would normally use for AoE damage. With the latest patch, if you're running an Ancestor or even 2, your Chain Lightning is going to do more than Acid Rain, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 targets, even versus an Acid Rain on 5 targets. So it's almost not worth it to press anymore. So you can absolutely let go of this point. However, I have done a bit of testing since the patch, and I will say, like, even though Chain Lightning does more damage, because you're probably pressing Healing Rain sometimes anyways to get that Deluge buff on the group, it's like a free damage cooldown. It's like a free damage global anyways, because you're casting Healing Rain anyways. So I don't know. If you're someone who doesn't want to run Healing Rain at all, or just doesn't like that playstyle, don't spec into Acid Rain. If you're somebody who's really interested in getting every single, little bit of DPS that you possibly can, you should probably still take Acid Rain. For me, I'm probably just gonna, depending on the dungeon, how much healing I want to do, how important the damage is, how tight the timer is, that's gonna be my deciding factor on Acid Rain. Right. Next we have. You are going to want to take Master of the Elements. Like I said, one of Farseer's strengths is single target healing, and this just augments that by a lot. So you're going to have 60% more effective healing surges, and if you cast a healing surge with 1 Ancestor, it's basically like a 1.5 healing surge, and if you cast it with 2, it's basically a 2 times healing surge. So you're getting like a 260% healing surge with Master of the Elements and 2 Ancestors, which is enough to basically heal anybody, including a tank, from 0 to 100% HP if you crit, which you will because you have a Tidal Waves buff, because you are able to stack up to 4. Like it all works so amazing. Okay, the great debate, Cloudburst versus Living Stream. So unfortunately, compared to Totemic, Healing Stream Totem is very strong with Totemic. It's not weak necessarily with Farseer, but it definitely loses the oomph that you get from Totemic because of the reactivity talent. Here, I'll just go over to it quick so you know what I'm talking about. All right, so reactivity is this guy here. It makes it so your Healing Stream Totem heals the second ally at 50% effectiveness. This has actually been bugged since beta. We don't know if they just haven't updated the tooltip or if they just haven't bothered to fix the bug yet. I guess maybe one day we'll find out, maybe we won't. But the Healing Stream Totem is actually healing the second ally at 100% effectiveness. So that makes it very strong for Totemic. With Farseer, you don't get that bonus because you don't have that talent. So Healing Stream Totem is probably fine for low to mid-high content. Like I'm sure you could probably do 12s and 13s with Healing Stream Totem as Farseer if you wanted. But I do think it probably drops off compared to Cloudburst Totem. One of the benefits of Cloudburst Totem with the spec is because you're using Flow of the Tide so often, your chain heals are filling Cloudburst Totem a lot. And with the Coalescing Water talent, so are your Riptides. So yeah, unfortunately the Ancestors themselves don't interact with Cloudburst Totem. Like they won't fill it up, but it's still a very strong ability regardless. And if you're someone who doesn't like Cloudburst Totem, or maybe just is hesitant because you don't really know how to use it, I would say try it out. It's really easy. Like you pop it before damage goes out, you fill it up, and then the next damage event you can like release it or recall it or whatever it's called, and it will just heal the group, right? You can even like I think the mistake people make when trying to learn how to play Cloudburst or get into it, they overthink it, right? You don't have to min-max Cloudburst. You can basically drop it on cooldown while damage is happening, and you're going to see some benefit from it. And then as you learn damage patterns and as you get used to how it works and how it heals and when it's healing and when it's effective, then you can start to make those snap decisions on min-maxing and exactly when to pop it. And you can even, you know, plan out timings if you want. Like if you know a boss ability is happening at a certain point, and then the next damage event is happening at a certain point after that, you can plan your Cloudburst around that. But you absolutely don't have to do that. I don't do that, and I still make it work totally fine. So I would say if you're someone who's hesitant about Cloudburst, don't let that stop you from playing this hero tree or playing the spec. I would say try it out, give it a shot. Maybe you will like it more than you think. Okay, Torrent you absolutely want because you're sending out Riptides left, right, and center. And then my beautiful baby Flow of the Tides, that makes this whole thing work. So Flow of the Tides makes it so your chain heal bounces an additional time, which is great. It's going to hit all 5 people in a Mythic Plus. And if you cast it on somebody affected by Riptide, it's going to eat that Riptide, so it's going to consume it, and it's going to increase the healing of the entire chain heal by 30%. Just to clarify, it does not eat the Riptide of everybody it touches. It only eats the Riptide of your initial target, and the entire chain heal is buffed by 30%. So this combined with High Tide, which I'll get to when I get down there, it just makes it so you can have chain heals that are basically an entire lay on hands on the lay on hands on the entire group. Like you can bring the entire group from 20% health to like 100% health, especially if you combine it with High Tide, Ancestral Swiftness, and Unleash Life. It's so fun. Like it's so fun to watch and see happen. And like I said, I'll put some stuff up on the screen showing some fights. Next we have Unleash Life. I already kind of talked about this. I know it's hard to get used to. It's an extra button on your bars, and Shamans already suffer from a little bit of button bloat, but it is it's worth it. It's something you need to get used to using. It's very easy. You don't even have to think about that much. It's a button you hit every 15 seconds. It's instant. The only thing it costs is a GCD. You don't even have to worry about the heal that it does after. I rarely do. It's really just your tool for summoning ancestors. And they also upgraded the animation. So now it's like this cool little like flourish when you do it, which is, you know, a lot of fun. See, it's like a little spinny kick. Okay. Earth Living Weapon, this is just free healing. Unless you want to take Ancestral Protection Totem for a certain dungeon, which you may want to. There are some dungeons where this would be useful, preferably the ones where you're not itching for every single heal you can get. So probably for something like Mists or Arkara or maybe Necrotic Wake, Ancestral Protection Totem is probably a good pick, just to have that extra B-res in your hand, in your back pocket. And also the health increase that it does for 30 seconds is nothing to scoff at as well. But yeah, otherwise take Earth Living Weapon because like I said, it's free healing. It's usually like 3 to 4% of a healing in my dungeon. Next we have Primal Tide Core. So this point used to be an Acid Rain up until they just buffed Chain Lightning. So now I have Primal Tide Core. This is a really strong ability with Coalescing Water. So it basically just gives a free Riptide every 4 casts of Riptide. It just picks a random person and hits them. It will not pick someone who already has Riptide on them, so it's a little bit smart in that way. And then if you're using a Coalescing Water Riptide, so if you have 1 or 2 charges and you Riptide, the Primal Tide Core Riptide is going to replicate that bonus healing. So you can basically get a really strong heal on 2 people in the group at once if Primal Tide Core lines up with a Coalescing Water buff Riptide. Okay, we also have Tidebringer. This is a must for this spec as well. It's going to make your chain heal super fast, make them jump very far distances. So you're going to be able to heal the entire group even if everybody is really spread out. And because you have infinite mana, the fast chain heals don't feel as bad as they do in Totemic, and they don't feel as bad as they did back in Dragonflight 2. Because, you know, it's not like you're worried about every time you cast chain heal. You can basically just rip it off as much as you want. And with the tier bonus, your tidal waves are more effective. So every chain heal that you cast with tidal waves is already going to be fast, even without Tidebringer. So with Tidebringer, it's such a fast cast. Like here, let's do this. I now have tidal waves, and there, it's like less than a second, and I get 2 of them. And then if I activate tidal waves again, even if I don't have Tidebringer, my chain heal is not that long to cast. And it's every 8 seconds you get a charge. So every 10 seconds. So it's once again just an incredible ability for this playstyle. Next, Earth and Harmony. This doesn't really have anything to do with the hero tree, but you absolutely want to take this if you're pushing high keys. There's not really anything else worth taking. Next, we have Coalescing Water. So this is the new talent that sort of brought everything together for Farseer. So Chain Heal's mana cost is reduced by 10%. So you already pretty much had infinite mana before this, but this just makes it more infinite, which I know is not a thing, but you get what I'm saying. And then every time you cast Chain Heal, you get a Coalescing Water buff, which will buff your next Riptide by 75%, and that stacks up 2 times. So if you cast 2 Chain Heals, 1, 2, except I'm lagging, sorry. Anyways, see, now I have 2 Coalescing Water charges, all right? And that is going to increase the healing of my next Riptide by 150%. It's also lighting up over here, so then I do Riptide, and it's a nice big fat Riptide. So basically, as you can probably guess, the playstyle is just alternating between Flow of the Tide Chain Heals and Riptides. So, you're getting your Riptides out, you're consuming them, you're getting more out, you're consuming them, you're getting more out, and you're consuming them. And it's just, like I said, it's a really fun game because you sort of want to triage your Riptides. You obviously want to target the ones that are closer to being out. But the nice thing about this playstyle and about the Farseer tree is you don't really have to worry about that. Like, you have enough Riptides that you can totally just use a Riptide. Sorry, man, I'm lagging like really hard here for some reason. But I can use a Riptide, and then I can immediately consume it. And then I can use another Riptide, and then I can immediately consume it. And then I can use another Riptide, and I can immediately consume it. And then I can use another Riptide, and I can immediately consume it. And then I almost have another Riptide up. That was like 5 Flow of the Tides Chain Heals in so little time, and it only cost me 10% of my mana. So it's, yeah, like I said, it's just really fun. And then another nice thing about this playstyle is one of the general rules of Shaman healing for years now is that you don't want to cast Chain Heal without High Tide because it's inefficient and, it costs a lot of mana and it just won't do as much healing. Now with Flow of the Tides and the fact that you have Riptides all the time, you can throw that rule out the window. I'd say cast Chain Heal whenever you feel like it. Don't worry about High Tide. And especially now that we have this cool Swelling Tide, which, now you can actually count up to your High Tides. It's a little bit easier to manage, especially if you get a little weak war like the one I have here. That is going to just, make it easier to target your High Tides. And it also makes it easier to build up to your High Tides because you're casting Chain Heal, which costs a lot of mana. So you're building those Swelling Tide stacks faster. So yeah, that was all just to say, throw that rule out the window, cast Chain Heal as much as you want. Don't worry about High Tide. Just try to keep track of it so you know when your Chain Heals are going to be a lot stronger. And you can maybe pair them with Unleashed Life or Ancestral Swiftness. Next, we have Ancestral Awakening. This is a really strong talent with Farseer because of the amount of Riptides and Healing Surges you're doing. This is usually like 6 to 8% of my healing in a dungeon, sometimes even higher. And it's free healing. It's healing you don't have to think about. And it's somewhat smart in the sense that it targets injured people. So just, yeah, absolutely take this talent. Next, real quick, I'll mention Reactive Warding. I would never in a million years take this talent because it just does not work with how I play the game. I'm so used to years and years and years of refreshing Earth Shield between pulls and then not really thinking about it. So if you're someone who's new to the game, you're new to this playstyle, I would say give it a shot. You might like it. I found it very clunky to play with. I found the healing wasn't worth it. Like, my healing surge is already so fast that I'm waiting on the GCD, the global cooldown, when I cast it. So Reactive Warding is the exact same to me as a Healing Surge, except Healing Surge is more fun to press. It activates AA. It goes into Cloudburst. Like it's just, for me, there's no reason to have Reactive Warding. It doesn't make any sense because I can already do the healing that Reactive Warding does without the annoyance of having to refresh Earth Shield more and have to actually pay attention to like the most optimal time to reset it. I think I fall into the trap of trying to min-max a talent like this. And I think it's a talent that you actually do need to min-max if you want to get good value out of it. So, just not for me, not fun. All right, lastly, I'll just Tidewaters and Primordial Wave. I would love to take these, but unfortunately we live in a world right now where they're just not worth taking, so don't even look at them. Don't look at Undercurrent because we're eating all of our Riptides. Downpour. Downpour is one that you want to take sometimes, and I'll get back to it in just a second. High Tide. This is going to make every 1 million mana you spend, basically every 100 stacks of Swelling Tide, you're going to get a buff called High Tide, and that is going to make your next Chain Heal, next 2 Chain Heals, heal for more, 10% more, and they don't reduce with each jump. The key thing there is that they don't reduce with each jump, and that's, like I said, if you're using a Flow of the Tides Chain Heal with the High Tide buff, with the Ancestral Swiftness buff, and with the Unleashed Life buff, that is your free lay on hands to the entire group, and you basically get 2 of them. You know, your second one isn't going to have Ancestral Swiftness and Unleash Life, but it's going to be very powerful still, especially if you're getting crits. And, you know, we do focus stacking crit as a Shaman. Like I said, you will notice 100% when you get a nice high tide chain heal that just like heals the entire group. It's such a nice feeling, and it's a lot of fun to work with, and it is a good way to fill your Cloudburst totem as well. Okay, last thing I'll talk about for talents is Deeply Rooted Elements. I initially was not a fan of this talent at all, but I saw a lot of Shamans running it, and then with Farseer, it's like you're casting so many Riptides, so you have a lot of chances to activate this. So I tried it out, and I have to say I apologize for anyone who I ever said that this was a dumb talent to run for Mythic Plus. It's not. It's a talent that you can't rely on. Like I said, you don't want to really focus on the gambling talents for Mythic Plus, but because I have, even if I played without Deeply Rooted Elements, if this was my build, I would be strong enough to handle anything. So it's not like I'm relying on Deeply Rooted Elements. It's just a bonus when it happens. Every so often, it will proc like at a stupid time, like between pulls where it's absolutely useless, or even after a damage event, which is like funny useless because it's like, it's after the damage happens. So it's like, why couldn't have this procced 10 seconds ago? But every so often, more often than you'd think, it procs exactly when you need it to. And especially sometimes like you may be in a situation where you don't have any cooldowns left and you're kind of freaking out about like, oh my god, how am I going to heal this next damage event? And then this procs and like all your worries go away. So like I said, it's not something you ever rely on, but it's such a nice bonus when it happens at the right time that it feels really fun to play. I'm going to say I absolutely love the new Ascendance model with the crazy hair. I think it's so much fun. So, any chance to proc this more often is a win for me. That being said, in any situation where I need downpour for the extra HP increase, like if you're which honestly, I'm going to be real with you, if you're not pushing 16, 17s, you don't need this. The group is going to be fine with your Ancestral Vigor for the most part in most situations. But if you're pushing high up, or your group is ragging on you because they want that extra health increase, you would take the point out of Deeply Rooted Elements and put it into downpour. If you really, 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 really want Deeply Rooted Elements and downpour, I would take the point out of Primal Tide Core and just use that. Because before Acid Rain became obsolete as of today, I was running this build without Primal Tide Core and I was doing totally fine. So you can absolutely just take this Primal Tide Core talent away and put it into downpour if you really want to run Deeply Rooted Elements. But anyways, yeah, so this is the build. I will put the import string in the video description, but like I said, I'm having so much fun. This is probably the most fun I've had playing Shaman. I can't even remember, probably since when I first started. It's just such a fun, actually, that's a lie. I had a ton of fun playing Totemic when I was playing in beta, and it was my first time playing it. Totemic was the shit. It was so much fun, and it still is. Like I said, Totemic just got a bit stale because it's like I said, at least for me, I feel like it's like the same, button sequence every single time. And you might think I'm crazy because like the way I've described Farseer, it's kind of the same in the sense that you're casting chain heals and Riptides and whatever, but the way it all synergizes with the 1 ancestor window and the 2 ancestor windows, and then all of your cooldowns on top of that, and being able to really fill up Cloudburst Totem in a fun way that doesn't just rely on a talent that makes Cloudburst Totem 15% stronger or whatever it is. Like it's really interactive for me, and it's just a ton of fun. And I also, like I said, I feel really powerful, and powerful in a game like this is fun. You want to be powerful, you want to be able to save your group, you want to be able to get through those really hard damage checks. Nothing feels better than having a group say, like amazing healing at the end of the dungeon. So trust me, with this build, if you learn how to play it, if you really lean into the Flow of the Tides playstyle, you really lean into getting out as many Riptides as you can, and you're reckless with using them. Like you eat them up as soon as they come out. You really don't limit yourself to like, when to press chain heal. You don't worry about that stuff. You don't worry about having high tide. You just really hit whatever button you want. That's probably my favorite thing about this spec, is just hit whatever button you want and watch the healing come out. And it's just great that way. So now that we've covered the basics and all the talents and the abilities that you'll be using for Farseer, let's actually take a look at some of the healing situations and how you might play them, and maybe the rotation that you'll use throughout a certain boss encounter or a certain trash encounter. Okay, so here's Avanoxx on a 16. This is the first boss in Arikara, City of Echoes. And yeah, this considering it's a 16, you'd think it'd be hard, but with Farseer, it's pretty easy as long as your group is doing the mechanics. But that can be said for pretty much every fight. Okay, so for Avanoxx, he basically cycles through two big abilities. He cycles through the Alerting Shrill, which is a high amount of damage in a short amount of time. And then he does the Gossamer Onslaught, which is a medium amount of damage over sort of like a long period of time. But you also have to move while it's happening, so that adds a little bit of a tricky factor to it. So you're going to want to save your biggest throughput windows for the Alerting Shrill, because that is where the most amount of healing is needed, and like the most amount of healing in the shortest amount of time. So I save my 2 Ancestor windows for the Alerting Shrill every time. And it's not a 30-second timer between every ability, so I do get my second Ancestor up quicker if I need to use it for an emergency, but I do sort of save it for that window. Then for the Gossamer Onslaught, I would just use like Healing Tide or Spirit Walker's Grace, or you really don't need any throughput cooldown for the Gossamer Onslaught. You can just rip your Flow of the Tides chain heals in between moving, and you should be fine. Like, nobody should die is what I mean. Like, you still have to top the group up afterwards, but anyways, yeah, so going into each damage event, whether it's Alerting Shrill or Gossamer Onslaught, I'm going to try and put Riptides out on the group, as many as possible as I can get out, as well as keeping everybody topped via healing surges and healing waves as needed. And as I'm doing that, I'm going to be building my Swelling Tides to get my High Tide procs, which make my chain heals very, very powerful. And then as you can see, like during this Gossamer Onslaught, every so often when I can, I'm using my chain heal to consume a Riptide and get a big heal in the group. And then that's going to give me a stack of Coalescing Water. And so my next Riptide is extra powerful, which is really nice for movement like that, because, you can use Riptide instantly. Then for an Alerting Shrill, I activate my second Ancestor. I use whatever throughput cooldown I want, so in this case Link. And then once again, I'm targeting those people with those Riptides, and I am just hitting chain heal on them. And in between chain heals, I'm hitting my Riptide, once again with the Coalescing Water buff. And in between all of that, if absolutely necessary, if somebody needs a massive heal, I could use a Healing Surge on one individual person who's in danger. And then as you'll see also, in between damage events, I'm trying to put down Healing Rain under the group, just so I can sort of maximize the deluge buff that we get. And since you're running Farseer, you can't move your Healing Rain, so for an instance like this, the group moves out of it. It's not a big deal. It's really just a bonus at this point. It's bonus healing. So like I said, if you don't want to play into the Healing Rain playstyle, that's totally fine. But I do think it's a useful tool for some of those tighter healing checks, and it'll just, augment your healing a bit. But yeah, this is like clockwork, right? Like it's so easy. It's just as easy as Totemic, just a few more globals and a little bit more freedom with what you can press and in what order. But really, as I said, you're just keeping Riptide up on the entire group, and you are sending those Flow of the Tide chain heals as needed, and combining with any cooldowns as well. And then because I'm running deeply rooted elements, every so often my Ascendance will proc by itself exactly when I need it to. It's not often, it's probably like, 5 to 10% of the time that actually happens. But when it does happen, that saves me any cooldown that I might have used, and just, lightens up the healing a little bit. So anyways, I will switch to a new fight now, but as you can see, this goes on the same way. And you can see my mana bar, like it's still at like 60%, and we're over 50% way through the fight. And I've been like chain casting, right? Like you can see I've pretty much been casting on the as much as I can through each of these damage events. So that's one of the beauties of Farseer, is you really don't have to worry about mana as you're dealing with all of this. And also one of the bonus Farseer talents that I talked about that Totemic doesn't have is for fights like this that do require movement, your Spirit Walker's Grace actually lasts a little bit longer as long as you're casting during it. So that's also another little bonus for a fight like this. All right, next we're going to do Anub'ikkaj. This is the second boss in the Dawnbreaker dungeon. And this boss is known for being one of the harder healing checks, but as you'll see, Farseer makes it actually really easy. It's just all about your cooldown management and your Ancestor management as well. So for the first Dark Orb, I'm going to get Riptide on the entire group. I'm going to put Healing Rain down for the Deluge buff, not really for the healing. And then as that Dark Orb explodes, I'm going to use my Unleash Life to summon one Ancestor. I'm going to heal the group up. And then in anticipation for the first AoE, which is the Shadowy Decay, I'm going to use Ancestral Swiftness to summon my second Ancestor, as well as Ancestral Guidance, which is my throughput cooldown. And all of that together is going to make healing that very easy. And also keep in mind that Ancestral Guidance really beefs up your Cloudburst healing. So if you are using Cloudburst Totem, which in my opinion you should be as a Farseer healer, your Cloudbursts are going to be really big during those Shadowy Decays with your Ancestral Guidance, and even without as well. Alright, we have second orb. You're going to see I basically did the same thing. I used Unleash Life to get my first Ancestor. I'm going to put Healing Rain on the ground for Deluge, and then I'm going to pop my cooldown here a little bit early to top the group. This time it's Ascendance. And then during this Shadowy Decay AoE, I'm going to use Ancestral Swiftness for that second ancestor, and then I'm going to, you know, just go ham with the healing there. And you can see I actually even let Unleash Life fall off there. Like I didn't refresh it right away just because of the way the timing worked out, and I was still fine. So, you know, like I said, Farseer healing, just making sure you alternate between your Flow of the Tides buffed chain heals, getting those Coalescing Waters buffed Riptides out, and then just using Healing Surge as needed, and you should have no issues with any of these healing checks. For the third orb that you just saw, there's a lot of time. Nothing happens in between, so you have lots of time to heal people up. And then also keep in mind for the ads, two things. First, you want to spawn the ads as close as possible to the boss and the group, just to make them easier to kill down for the DPS. Second, the ads are actually really helpful for shamans because they do a shadow cast, that coagulating dark mist or whatever. And if you interrupt that and you have the Seasoned Winds talent, you will get the 15% DR, which really helps in this fight. The fourth orb will be this one with the overlap. So you have the orb and the Shadowy Decay basically happening at the same time. This is where I always use Spirit Link, and I couple it with Astral Shift as like my own personal DR so that I can donate more health to the Spirit Link. And anybody else who's using a personal will help that out as well. And honestly, once you get past that third orb, like Shadowy Decay, sorry, the fourth orb, which is the one with the overlap, you're pretty much home free for this fight as far as here. You're not going to run out of mana. You have tons of healing. So now all you really need to do is just make sure you heal people up after the dark orb and then use a throughput cooldown for the Shadowy Decay, as there will be no more overlaps after that point. And because we have the 2-minute cooldown timers on both, or all three rather, Ancestral Guidance, Ascendance, and Healing Tide, you basically just cycle through those 3 cooldowns throughout the remainder of the fight, and you should be fine. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you're like not, you know, you don't have a cooldown for this, just ask your group to pop personals, maybe use something like Zephyr, pop your own personals, and once again, just really manage those ancestor cooldowns, or sorry, those ancestor windows, you know, making sure that you have Unleash Life down pretty much all the time, and saving that Ancestral Swiftness for those big AoE phases. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So oddly enough, funny story, this run, we actually missed the timer by about 3 seconds. And that's just because our boss damage is really, really low with this composition. We actually ran this dungeon back with a slightly different comp, and we finished it with like over 3 minutes left, which was nice. But anyways, this boss is usually around 4 minutes, but with this specific group and composition, it was about a 5-minute boss. So yeah, I'm not going to sit through this entire boss fight. Usually it'd be dead or close to dead by now. So yeah, we'll just move on to the next one. But as you can see, it's pretty easy rotation here. You're basically just cycling your ancestor windows into those Shadowy Decay. And for the one overlap you get where the orb and the Shadowy Decay go off at the same time, you're just going to use Spirit Link on the group. Okay, so the next boss we're going to look at is E.D.N.A in the Stone Vault. This is actually one of, I mean, I don't know, it doesn't feel like it should be, but it's definitely one of the more healing intensive fights of this season. So there's a few different ways you can do the spikes. The way that I find the easiest way, especially if you're like in a pug or whatever, is to do 2 on the first set, break 2 spikes, you break 1 on the next set, and then you just get an explosion of 3. So this fight is basically just using everything as needed. So I pretty much have my Ancestral Swiftness use, like my 2 ancestor window, every time I break 2 spikes, and then it usually kind of comes up again either during the slam or shortly after. So I can either use it for the next 2 spike, or I can use it to catch up if I fall behind, you know, between the 2 spike windows. But otherwise, you're basically doing the same thing you've been doing for the other fights, which is keeping Riptide on the entire group as ammunition for your Flow of the Tides buff chain heals. Keep in mind, when they're also buffed with High Tide, it's like basically a group lay on hands, which is really awesome. And then you're also just using Healing Surge as needed to top people up if anybody gets super low. If you have anyone squishy in your group, like for instance in this one we have a Boomkin, you can also see the tank is also a little bit squishy here as well. Every time you know you're about to break 2 spikes, you can basically have like sort of a precasted Healing Surge or a Chain Heal going out on the target who's the most squishiest in the group. Or that's when you can save sort of your Ancestral Swiftness and use that as like a punch of a Healing Surge for the squishy person who's getting hit. Otherwise, I'm using a cooldown for every time we're about to go into the slam phase. I usually, if like the group needs a little bit of help being topped up before the slam, I will use a cooldown before. If not, then I will wait until the slam to actually activate that cooldown. I also advise, if things are looking a little bit spicy during whenever you're planning on popping Spirit Link, don't be afraid to also pop a throughput cooldown in addition to Spirit Link on this fight. So for this specific fight, we weren't in Discord or anything, so we weren't really coordinating any defensive, so I'm kind of just playing it by ear. But if you are in Discord or playing with a group where you sort of like know who's going to be popping what and when, you can coordinate this fight and make it a lot easier with like when you're using Zephyr, when you're using Spirit Link, when people are using cooldowns, you know, when your pal is using maybe a Magic Bop or something like that. Like, this is just one of those fights that becomes a lot easier if you're in voice with and able to communicate. Otherwise, though, like I said, Farseer has all the tools to deal with this, which is great. You're really able to get those big group heals in with your chain heals that are buffed by Flow of the Tides and High Tide, and you're able to sort of triage and save people as an on-needed basis, or sorry, on an as needed basis with your big healing surge, like single target heals. And then, because as I mentioned for the last fight for Anub'ikkaj, most of your throughput cooldowns are on a 2-minute window, you can basically just cycle through them as needed. For any situation where you find yourself with no cooldowns to use, this is when you really want to utilize your 2 ancestor window, any defensives you have, and even maybe a health pot if needed. But really, the name of the game, as all of these fights, is keeping as many Riptides out as much as possible, and then just using those as ammunition for your chain heals. The tricky thing with Farseer, like the only one thing I wish was a little bit better, is that I wish it had a way to do DPS while you were healing. Like, it'd be cool if ancestors, instead of always just copying what you do, sometimes would just like send off a random DPS or whatever. Because on a fight like this, where you basically need to spend every global on healing the group, it can become very hard to put in any meaningful DPS, which, you know, is unfortunate when a healer like a Disc Priest, you know, which is one of the reasons why they're meta right now. But, you know, when a healer like a Disc Priest can just like, you know, triple, quadruple our DPS while doing the same amount of healing, just because of how their class works, right? So that's kind of the only downside with Farseer that I find. That being said, compared to Totemic, it's not like Totemic is doing a ton more boss damage, so it's nothing really to worry about. It's just unfortunate compared to some of the other classes and what they can do in terms of DPS. But like I said, it's fine. There's only a couple of fights like that, so it doesn't really matter. And the huge burst DPS that Farseer can do, especially now that they've buffed the Ancestor Chain Lightnings like 2 times now, and like pretty large buffs, you can get out some pretty huge DPS in the moments where you're on packs that like don't require you to spend every global on heals. All right, and I think that's it. There's obviously a few more bosses I could go over, but I'm looking at some of the footage I have, and I might just make like a full boss guide as a separate video. I think this is enough to just kind of show you what Farseer is capable of, how much fun the spec is, and the overall gameplay of it is. Yeah, I suggest, like, if you haven't tried out this playstyle and you're someone who really likes to play Resto Shaman, or maybe you're someone who's new to it and you maybe don't like the way Totemic works, or you're looking for something that's a little bit different, a little bit more unique, in terms of the Resto Shaman experience, I highly advise that you give Farseer a shot. As you can see, like I said, it's really effective. I'm having, in this video, keep in mind, most of the footage and recordings in this video was done actually like about a month ago. So this is, you know, pre being maxed gear. This is when 16s were still considered pretty hard. And you can see there's, being able to do this content is nothing to scoff at for a non-meta class. So yeah, my opinion is that Resto Shaman is extremely strong right now. The only reason it's not meta is because Disc Priest is also just extremely strong right now, and you don't have any other priests in the group. So, and because obviously you have Enhancement Shaman as meta, you know, the class stacking is a little bit, it's not something people like to do, which is another reason why we're not really considered meta. But in terms of throughput, you know, the utility that you bring, everything that Farseer brings is really great, and it's a lot of fun. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this guide, and I will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in.